Hello, viewer. This is Mike Daly again with the Cut the Crap channel. And today I am going to talk about why Christians must not support Trump. Now, I will say first, I can understand why a lot of people would vote for Trump. And I don't think just, voting for Trump means, that you're like a bad person or something. It's I think it's very understandable, given that he's running against Hillary Clinton, who was a very problematic candidate, and a lot of the things he said during the campaign were actually if he actually followed through with them, would have been good things. I mean, he for one thing, he was talking about starting some kind of universal health care based on some things that he said. He talked about working to rebuild the infrastructure across the country, which is something that's direly needed. So I can get why a lot of people would vote for him, but if you've been paying attention at all to what's happened since he's been elected, to his appointments and everything that's happening, and you call yourself a Christian, but you still strongly support him, then you're just really missing it. And I'm gonna kind of give you a little whack on the nose, I guess, to try to gently, or maybe not so gently, get through to you. Now, first I'll say conservative politicians, at least for the, past 40 years or so, they've made it kind of a tactic to pander to evangelical voters to get votes. I mean, we saw this, to some degree under, like George W. Bush, and there's I think the two Republican senators like Ted Cruz, Mark Rubio are always making a big deal about, what, great Christians they are, and but with Trump, I think it's kind of reached a whole other level. And now, one thing I find interesting is that, okay, a lot of Christians will be really concerned about the rise of the anti-Christ spirit and whatnot. But what I think is interesting about that is I think Trump himself seems to be operating at least a little bit in this anti-Christ spirit that that the Christians are so afraid of. And what do I mean by that is, well, I think one of the traits of someone that's operating in that spirit is that they establish, they cause this just real devotion among their followers, and their followers will look at them as if they've actually been sent by God to lead them or save them or whatnot. And and then when it talks about the Antichrist spirit in the Bible, I mean, it talks about I guess like in the last days when like the actual final Antichrist comes, that would like deceive, that it would be such a strong deception that it could deceive even the very elect. So and so, like, when I just see just the following that Trump has, and what I find really disturbing is how, like, just it seems a lot of really prominent Christian ministers have just really solidly thrown their support behind him. You got, like, Franklin Graham, Pat Robertson, Jim Baker, who isn't really so prominent anymore. And then, of course, you've got Paula White, his, quote unquote, spiritual advisor. So I just find that just very disturbing. Just the support that Trump's been able to garner among prominent Christian ministers. Now, I would say some biblical principles for how we as Christians should decide whether or not we support a political reason, a political candidate, say. I would say two things. One, I would say, well, probably the most important is based on their policies, and in particular, how much their policies would help the most vulnerable. Like, how will their policies help the poor, like help minorities, even help immigrants, basically anybody that's kind of been on the sidelines. How will their policies help those people? And I would say another quality to look at is how selfless is this person? Is this person, do they really seem to put the welfare of the people first, even, or do they seem just kind of more concerned with themselves and their buddies? And I have to say, I mean, to anyone, I think that looks at this honestly, Trump fails miserably on both these counts, and I'd say, okay, if you want an example of similar figures in the Bible to Trump, I think all you got to do is say one, I think, is like King Ahab, back like when Elijah was around, and also King Herod in the days of Jesus. I think these were both leaders that were just very selfish, really didn't care at all about the people, just kind of cared about their own, their own agenda, their own power. I mean, I think one biblical story for like Herod, talks about, okay, when he had imprisoned John the Baptist, basically because John had hurt his feelings, because he said it was wrong that he had married his brother's wife, and so that hurt his feelings. So he threw John in prison, but he didn't actually kill him because he had some respect for John. I mean, I guess he knew that John had a reputation of being a prophet, so he wasn't quite so far gone that he was going to kill him. But then one day, so Herodias, his brother's wife that he married, her daughter was performing at a party, and she's dancing, and she dances so well that Herod, he says in front of all his guests, well, I'll give you anything you ask of me, up till half the kingdom. And under the advice of her mother, the girl asks for the head of John the Baptist. And so Herod, he doesn't really want to do that, but since he just made this big promise in front of all his guests, and he doesn't want to look bad, he orders John the Baptist killed. And so I think that is exactly the kind of way that Trump operates. It's just all about him wanting to look good, get good publicity. Somebody kind of hurts his feelings on cable television. He feels like he's got to retaliate. And then, looking at his policies, I mean, for one, he said, made this big deal about how he's going to drain the swamp. But his cabinet is, I think, about the richest cabinet that there's ever been. I mean, in terms of the millionaires and billionaires that he has on his cabinet. And Trump's main legislative accomplishment and along with him and the Republican Congress is passing the big tax reform package, which was really just a big giant tax cut for the richest Americans. And, I guess like when it happened, I mean, some people, were saying, oh, well, us middle class people will get a tax cut too. But now that tax time is here, and people are doing their taxes, a lot of people are seeing how they've been screwed. And like people that were used to getting big refunds are now finding they're just getting little tiny refunds, or maybe even actually owing money. And then another thing you can look at, the recent government shutdown we had, the longest in history, over Trump's wall, which... I mean, if you look at it honestly, okay, I mean, if this wall was like so important, why didn't Trump push for it when, the Republicans had full control of Congress? Why did he wait until the Democrats took control of the House, and now he's making this big deal for it? Because it's really just political theater, and he's trying to score points with his base and whatnot. And, these conservative people like Ann Coulter kind of hurt his feelings, and so he's got to put on this big show. And as a result of this big show, all these government workers were, out of work for nearly an entire month, and the ones that got hurt the most are really the poorest workers, the ones that are not technically government employees, but work, say, with a company that's a government contractor. People, say, like janitors or that work in security, that type of thing that get low pay. And those people doesn't look like they're going to get back pay. I mean, there's been like some efforts in Congress for getting legislation that would pay them back, but that's unlikely to pass. So, those are two things we're just looking at where, you can see Trump really just does not give a shit about, the regular Americans, especially, like poor Americans. And so now there was this quote I saw on Twitter. I couldn't find the name. It's a public figure that said this, but I totally agree with the statement. It says, if you think that Trump is a good Christian, but Obama wasn't, your real faith is white supremacy. And so I'm just saying, I mean, if the sense I get from his supporters is like, oh, well, I know he's not perfect. I know, like he has his problems or whatever. But it's like, oh, something about just hearing him talk and having him all just kind of makes me feel good inside or something. There's just something just resonates. Well, maybe what resonates is that he's racist, and you're racist too. I mean, and I know that people don't like that term, but I gotta say, I mean, I don't think there's very many like African American or Hispanic Americans that feel that way about Trump. That's pretty much a Caucasian thing. So if you're calling yourself a Christian and that's how you feel, you really need to check your heart and repent, because you are following somebody that God is not for. I mean, people say, I hear a lot of Christians will say, oh, well, we just need to pray for Trump. And I do pray for Trump, pretty much the same prayer that he would repent or perhaps have some kind of Nebuchadnezzar experience where, I don't know, maybe he loses his mind for a while to humble him. And if he doesn't, that he gets, removed from office. I certainly don't wish any actual harm to come to him or his family, but I do not like seeing wicked rulers in power messing up this country. So anyway, thank you for listening. I appreciate any comments. Also, please subscribe to my channel, and you can also ring the bell so you'll be informed of new videos. Thank you. Have a good day.